they earn dividends from the company's profits. If the company has low profits, which would be shown by the financial statements at the end of the accounting period, the dividends that the shareholders would get would be reduced. So workers would become redundant and will lose their jobs because the business they work for neither produces or it's no longer needs as much workers. So they will lay off some of their workers because they no longer need it. This impact could cause equivalent of 195 million job losses, says the International Labour Organization chief. Employees may also be asked to work from home, and this would reduce the productivity of them because they might not have all the resources they need, and working from home can be distracting, so they won't be as productive. Almost 33% of businesses will cut employer salaries, as stated in the economicstimes.com, which could adversely affect the employers and workers.
Good evening, everyone. I am Meet and I'm going to take over. So the impact on consumers. Consumer spending will be low because of lockdowns imposed to contain this virus. They will not be allowed to go anywhere and will be forced to stay at home. Also, they may be uncertain about the economy, so it will force them not to spend. This is a huge factor on which consumer spending depends. Time spent indoors will also cause them to spend more on home entertainment and groceries. Of course, we consumers need some kind of entertainment in order to stay at home. There will be less variety of choices for consumers to choose from. This is because, as stated in previous slides, millions and billions of businesses will shut down with only a few still operating. This will reduce the output of goods and services, and many will stop producing unessential goods and start producing essential goods, such as nose masks, sanitizers, and kits, medical kits. They may, yeah. Advantages to businesses of this impact. Increased revenue for business due to the sale of essential goods such as sanitizers. The reason is obvious because the PED of such products is inelastic, and so firms would take advantage and increase their price. Businesses using e-commerce have a huge advantage as consumers are now turning towards e-commerce as a solution to get goods and services. This is because the brick and mortar shops are closing down and consumers are having to stay at home due to restrictions to movement by the government. So the only choice left is e-commerce. Thus, the e-commerce industry is taking advantage of this and expanding. Businesses using robots in the manufacturing process can still be producing goods as there's very little or no need of workers to be there. So productivity will not be affected and businesses can increase sales of goods through e-commerce also. Disadvantages to businesses of this pandemic: higher loss. Because productivity will be low, businesses will not have any method of producing and distributing their goods or services. Maybe because the workers are not coming to factories or anything else. Net cash flow and liquidity will also be low, as this is explained by my partner Jessica in previous slides. Lower chances of survival, especially for small firms, because the cash will be used up and businesses will be illiquid. So it will not have enough cash for working capital. And working capital is the cash needed for the day-to-day activities. So the business will collapse if it doesn't have working capital. Higher diseconomies of scale in the form of poor communication and lack of motivation to workers. This is because employers will be working from home. And so communication will be affected due to that. They may be distracted. Also, workers will not be motivated as they would think that they are no more needed in the workplace and they are redundant. This will affect the way they think and it will also result in lower productivity for the firm. Now, how businesses may cope up with finance during the pandemic. Businesses should delay the purchase of non-current assets. What this would do is that they will now have enough cash for working capital and they will survive longer. They should reinvest their profit made into the business for survival. This point is self-explanatory. They should raise finance by the sale of unwanted non-current assets. If businesses are able to identify their unwanted assets, they can sell them to raise finance. In regards to this, business could also fire redundant workers as they are no more needed and are only increasing costs to the business. They should reduce inventory levels and trade receivables. Reducing inventory levels will mean that the cost of businesses will reduce, such as the maintenance cost, the storage cost, and the transportation cost. Also, if the business is able to reduce trade receivables, they will have more cash and will be able to become liquid. Now, what is trade receivables? Trade receivables are the total amounts owing to a company for goods or services it has sold. If any source of finance is needed, they should use overdrafts or trade credits for short-term sources and use bank loans or leasing for long-term sources. Impact on the industries. Now let's talk about the top 5 industries affected due to this pandemic. 1. The tourism industry. The travel and tourism industry has been severely affected by COVID-19. As soon as the WHO has declared it a pandemic, the countries around the world have started closing borders and inducing transportation limitations. Moreover, people themselves are avoiding travel unless necessary. Therefore, the leisure industry has been negatively impacted and yeah. Sports industry. Statista.com states that there's a loss of 8.22 billion US dollars in the sports industry due to the pandemic. This dramatic spread of the pandemic has led to sports events across the planet being postponed and ultimately cancelled. The 2020 Summer Olympics have been rescheduled to 2021, while the 2020 UEFA European Championship, which was originally planned to be held across 12 different countries, has also been pushed to next summer. Entertainment. Music concerts are also cancelled. Examples are Coachella in India and California. So let's explain this. With large gatherings seen as triggering points for virus spreads, concerts, music festivals, and movie theaters have all taken a huge hit. Fortunately, some of these sub-industries have found a way to override the virus by moving their operations online. The last industry, the fourth is the retail, marketplaces, and restaurants. Malls and shopping centers belong to the same category. The retail industry and its social aspect have been affected as people distance themselves from crowded space. People are ordering their necessities online, and doorstep delivery has now blossomed. Restaurants and marketplaces are trying to make the most of hyperlocal delivery with food, medicine, grocery, and many more, all gaining momentum. And the financial, which is the fintech. Financial markets as a whole are expected to sustain the biggest blow during the pandemic. The fintech sector has suffered a drop in all level transactions as people keep spending less as lockdowns become tighter. A low transaction rate has led to a major dip in the value of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoins and or Ethereum. At the same time, regular currencies are going through major shifts as well. Foreign exchange rates have been experiencing dramatic swings. Similar scenarios have been played in stock exchanges and oil markets. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jessica and Leeds, on such an insightful presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on businesses. Before we continue, if Mr. Segun Isodola is online, he can please send me a message. Thank you very much. And so at this point, we'll take, okay, sir is around. Thank you, sir. At this point, we'll take 1 or 2 questions for our students, and then we'll call on an expert, Mr. Segun Isodola. I will introduce him appropriately at the right time. So we'll take 1 or 2 questions for our students, So if there's any question you want to ask them, those who presented, Jessica and Lead, you can do that now before I introduce our next speaker. All right, that is okay. So we would invite Mr. Segun Isojola. He is the manager, governance, risk and compliance, e-process international, South Africa, that's SA Ghana. And he's going to give us a final thought or his thought on the impact of COVID-19 on businesses, how COVID-19 has impacted the business world. He's a businessman, his business and the global business. And please bear in mind also that when it comes to that of the economy, Mr. Daniel would also fuse the global economy and also some aspect of the business. Thank you very much, Mr. Segun Isojola. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. I must say I'm really impressed by Jessica and Kakani. That was a wonderful presentation. Well done. Basically, there is hardly any sector that has not been affected by this COVID-19. It's a pandemic to the health of the people, and it's also a pandemic to our pockets. Business-wise, the world will never remain the same. You see, we have our shopping malls, they are now scanty. We have restaurants deserted. We have banking halls because of this social distancing. You go there, you see people coming in. There are very, very few. People are now going electronic. Everything is now electronic. Transports are done electronically. Now, just like Jessica and Kakani, they've said, the impact on businesses spans between the cash flow and the employees, the customers, and the merchandise. I was explain, for the customers, you find out that a lot of customers, especially in the tourism industry, they virtually stopped going to the hotels. And then the hotels, tourism industry, the tourist attractions, they're suffering because they don't have patronage. Now for the banking industry, people are going to withdraw their money from the bank because they prefer having this cash with them at home because they don't know what will happen. Cash flow, businesses are not getting money as they used to because the banks should give them money, they are not willing to give them money. They're reluctant because of the fear and the uncertainty. The employees too. There is this fear among the employees because a lot of people have been sent home either on compulsory leave, either they've been furloughed, either they've been told, okay, you're going to have your salary cut by half. Different measures have been taken, and every day employees come to work not even sure of if they will be employees of the same company the next day. So that in itself affects their productivity. Now the merchandise, Africa as a whole, we depend so much on Asia, especially China, for our raw materials, and even for what we stock in our malls, as for our supermarkets. And because of this pandemic, this merchandise did not been forthcoming, and this has really impacted businesses. And like Kakani said, that the companies are now trying to adopt stringent fiscal measures such that they are spending less on things that will not allow for cash flow. They are spending less on fixed assets. They are working on things that will allow them so that in case of anything, they can always get back the money. The economy, the business have been affected, but we are hoping that as so far so good. After the lockdown has been lifted, they are picking up, and it's the hope of the world and of Africa that soon businesses will come back to normal. And of course, we know that this is the new normal. It's not the normal we are used to, because now, for instance, where formerly I go to the office every day. Now I don't go to the office every day. I work at home for 2 weeks, work in the office for 2 weeks. Things are changing, and the way things are, they're going to stay like this. So, but we are hoping that by the time we come back to the new normal, that businesses will pick up, and then we can start having our profits, and our stakeholders and shareholders, they will start smiling once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Segun Isodola, for such an insightful points raised. I have a question, and I believe some others would also have a question. We'll give them the opportunity. What is the future of Africa in terms of business? Looking at the impact of COVID-19, is businesses in Africa going to survive? What is the future of, how does the future looks like? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Shidrak. You see, uh, uh, our governments, they are doing their best to see how they can support ailing businesses, and it's the hope that these monies will be disbursed with proper monitoring. They will not just disburse the money for somebody to go and use it for politics. We are hoping that these monies will be disbursed to these ailing businesses, that these businesses will make proper use of it. And also, businesses they are trying to adapt. They are adapting to the new normal, where we have to ensure that when it comes to our our service delivery, for instance, we can reach the customer without having, uh, without making it compulsory for the customer to come to us. We can reach the customer from wherever he is. So banks, for instance, they are spending more on their e-platforms. I was watching was it BBC some time ago, and I saw that the tourism industry in Kenya, in South Africa, they're having virtual sessions where people can be in far away in Europe, in Asia. They can pay some money and log into these sessions, and we had tour guides that go around with video showing them animals, and they can see animals as the animals move, as they fight, as they migrate from one place to the other. And that is a way of adopting to the new normal. So yes, I see business in Africa surviving. We will surely survive, definitely. But it's our hope that whatever the government is doing, the government is sincere. That if they say they're giving monies to ailing businesses, they are really giving monies to ailing businesses, and not ailing businesses that are only on paper and are not real. They are fictitious. So if our governments, they are sincere, they can, and they really do what they are doing, then businesses can pick up, and then we can have a better economy. But we are looking at a case where it takes us like 2 years, 3 years from now to really get back to that robust state that we were. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is very educating. We may take one or two questions for Mr. Segun. So if you have a question, then after that, we'll move on to the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. Okay, so I see Mr. Daniel. Okay, who else has a question for Mr. Segun?
Yeah, I have a question.
All right.
With respect to, new graduates coming out fresh from the universities, we know how this pandemic has affected their final preparation to the job markets. So when they come to the job markets, how can the businesses put them into good use, manage them and be able to bring out their potential? What can some businesses do to ensure that? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. And fortunately, I work in an IT firm, and I must tell you that as old as I am, I've gone back to school. I have realized that what we have now as new normal is different from what we are used to. So businesses are now going towards towards electronic channels. So for the fresh graduates, my advice would be that if a fresh graduate should start looking at doing courses online that can help him know about electronic channels, how to manage electronic channels. For instance, I'm currently running the course on robotics. That means that I'm working on how I'll make myself relevant, because even where I work, people are being fired. And if you are there and you're not relevant to the new age, to the new realm, then you'll be sent away. So if the young graduates looks at things like IT, things like robotics, even if it's not IT, in whatever field the young graduate finds himself, they can look at the way his or her field has evolved over time, and look at a way that he can fuse into the new age of that his profession. Because for instance, even medicine, I remember those days when you do CS, the tier can be massive, but these days it's almost like a very small tier and everything's out. So the fresh graduate should not rest on his or hers. The fresh graduate should look for ways, should go online, research what is new in my field, what is relevant in my field, what do I do? And if the new graduate goes to a bank, for instance, and tells the bank that, okay, I'm aware that you people have opened your e-channels. With that, you've been exposed to the risk of fraud. I have gone to do a course on risk management. I'm going to do a course on internet policing. I'm going to do a course on ethical hacking. I can be of help to safeguard your services so that you don't lose money. The banks will be willing to help. So in summary, my advice is that the fresh graduate should ensure that he or she is abreast with what obtains currently in the field of study, or you can even delve into another field. My first degree was not in IT. I did civil engineering in my first degree, and my master's IT. So if you can go into it in something else and then look for how to pursue a career in that. The truth is that no matter how much you say there are no jobs, people are still getting jobs, and these people are the only ones that have made themselves relevant in the new age. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Segu and Isejola. We are very grateful. Before we take the next topic, I want to introduce Mr. Daniel Asama. I want to introduce him first, and then after that, the students will present on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, the global economy. And so, Mr. Daniel Asama is the co-founder of D&S Business Consulting, established in 2017 and registered in New Jersey. He holds a master's degree in economic development and MBA in global business and management. His research, graduate research, was at Rutgers University, and he explores the nexus between African economic development and its diplomatic relations with the United States and China. Such a great man. So we would take our next presentation from the student, then we'll get back to Mr. Daniel. So, impact of COVID-19 on the economy. We have Kwabena Dakon and Raj Takwani doing this presentation. Thank you very much, Kwabena and Raj, you have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Raj Sakwani.
And I'm Kwabena Dakwasari.
Today, we'll be looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy. The novel coronavirus has heavily impacted the global economy. The lightning spread of the virus means that governments have to impose lockdowns and restrictions of movement, which has widely affected economic activity, dramatically reducing demand for most goods and services means most GDPs of economies are declining. Many economists have termed it as the worst economic crisis, as the depression is even greater than the 2008 economic crisis.
One of the most effective ways of measuring economic growth is by the real gross domestic product. This is very effective because it takes into account the inflation in the economic period. Global GDP growth, which was forecasted to grow by 3.3% for 2020, has reduced to about 2.9% because of the pandemic. Europe, Australia, and New Zealand's real GDPs have been the most affected. Although Australia and New Zealand are expected to recover quickly, this is not the case for Europe, as it has been the epicenter of the crisis for a very long time. Even though Africa's real GDP hasn't really been affected, it's expected to worsen in the coming months, with the World Health Organization highlighting that it might be the next epicenter for the crisis. South America is not faring any better because of the huge amount of cases in Brazil, while Asia's stringent and control measures has helped it to recover.
There has been a huge reduction of workers around the world due to a huge reduction in demand of products and services. The United Nations already estimated 195 million job losses because of the virus, with about 30% from the USA alone. Most governments are trying combinations of fiscal and monetary policies to try to cancel out the effects. Governments are introducing stimulus packages worth billions of dollars to boost businesses so that they can pay their fixed costs and retain workers. Corporate interest rates corporate interest rates are near zero in countries that have been gravely affected by the outbreak to decrease borrowing costs so that investment can increase in the economy. Tax rates have been reduced and in some cases exempted to support businesses further so that they can help decrease unemployment rates in the economy. As you can see in the diagram, more than 3 million people have filed coronavirus hits in only the 2 months of the pandemic.
Governments have abandoned many macroeconomic objectives and aims to invest heavily in health sectors so that they can fight against the coronavirus. The reduction in tax revenues obtained from businesses and individuals, along with the increase in government spending, has caused a colossal fiscal deficit for most economies. Advanced economies have a greater fiscal deficit of GDP, as you can see in the diagram. The US, Canada, France, and UK are examples of this. While emerging economies such as China, Brazil, and India have less amounts of fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP. Globally, the net public debt is expected to rise from 69.4% of national income in 2019 to about 85.3% in 2020. Advances have been obtained from the International Monetary Fund globally and from other agencies so that healthcare can be invested on.
The corona, the coronavirus, the coronavirus has altered the global demand and supply. Some personal protection equipment like masks and gloves have become necessities to fight the pandemic. The huge demand has meant that there have been shortages in some countries, and some countries are producing their own personal protection equipment. The telecommunication and web conferencing companies have become major contributors to the GDP. Governments have to spend largely on this to ensure maximum safety in the healthcare facilities. Shortages in supply of the PPEs are causing price gouging, which basically means a high increase in the price of a product, a high increase in the rate of price of the product. Goods are also being stocked because of malign deflation so that they can be sold for more when the economy is fully revived. Malign deflation is when prices are reducing with demand. It also causes cyclical unemployment. Manufacturers have started supplying PPEs or personal protection equipment to obtain some revenue and also support their governments. As you can see in this diagram, um, the demand for PPE products have increased this year.
Some economies have been impacted heavily than other economies. One example of this is the oil-reliant economies. Since global trade volumes are expected to decline between 13 to 32% in 2020, the demand for oil has also reduced and the supply for it as well. Oil prices have reduced by a staggering 60% because of the lack of demand. And the cost of keeping tankers out at sea has increased from about 20,000 a day to about 200,000. So as you can see in the diagram, this talks about the change in real income of people in oil-reliant countries. In countries such as Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, the real income of the population has reduced by about 15% because of the loss of revenues from oil. Much of the world's storage capacity is almost full, about 76%, because oil producers are storing oil so that they can then supply it when prices increase.
The tourism sector has also been gravely affected during this pandemic. There's been no influx of tourists into countries, towns, and cities. Influx means the entering of people or to people. The global tourism industry is expected to lose from 300 to 450 billion dollars in revenue because of a 20 to 30% reduction in tourists in 2020. Ghana itself has lost $171 million in tourism this year. There's been a huge negative impact on countries where tourism is a main contributor to the GDP or the gross domestic product. Countries like British Virgin Islands and Aruba are such examples. Unemployment levels are particularly high on tourism that rely on industries that rely on the tourism sector. Islands and territories like the Maldives and the British Virgin Islands, where tourism is more than 85% of the GDP, are at a greater risk of recession due to the virus.
Some economies may recover in different ways, and some have already started recovering. There might be a V-shaped recovery. This is when the economy goes back to where it was before the crisis, with no slight decreases or increases along the way. Economic growth continues at the same rate as before. In the U-shaped recovery, the damage lasts for a longer duration of time before the economy bounces back. In the W-shaped recovery, also called a double dip, the economy comes back from a recession, maybe because of expansionary fiscal or monetary policies introduced by the government, but then it falls down again because longer-term supply-side policies are needed for economic growth. In an L-shaped recovery, this is the worst scenario. The economy recovers to a certain degree, but then it never goes back to where it was before the crisis. A scenario that looks like the Nike swoosh logo is when the economy faces a steep decline, but then has a gradual recovery, as shown by the diagonal line. Some economies have started recovering, and those that are yet to recover have some economies have started recovering, and the hope is that other economies will continue to. But this will always be regarded as one of the worst economic crises in history. Thank you.
Wow, that's great. The impact of COVID-19 on the economy. And please take note that these students are in grade 9. They are in grade 9, and I'm amazed at the presentation. So deep, so. It's. I think we need to appreciate them, and we are very grateful to our students, those who are presented on the business and the economy. We are really grateful. At this moment, we may take one or two questions for our students, and then we would invite the expert or an expert on the field, Mr. Daniel Asama, to also give us a lecture on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. So if there's a question for our students, one or two, and then we listen to the expert's view. Okay, all right. So thank you very much, Mr. Kwabena Darko and Raj Takwani, for um, such a great presentation. Thank you very much. So at this point, we would invite Mr. Daniel Asama. Daniel Asama, who is a consultant, a business consultant based in New Jersey, United States of America. So thank you, sir. You have the floor now.
Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to join you all, and also to learn from my wonderful junior brothers. In fact, you guys are wonderful. You are wonderful, and it's a great lecture. To Raj and to Kwabena Darko Asare. Now, just to go a little overview, I wouldn't go back to all that you have touched on, but sincerely, you've almost covered all that I wanted to talk about. But what I'll focus on now is the implications. So just go a little deep as to the policy aspect of things that may probably come as a result of all these things, and as well the impact of globalization. I think you did not really mention over that. So to go back to what Raj and Kwabena did mention about the GDP going down, we've seen all these happening. And if you talk about the global economy, you cannot take out the United States, you cannot take China, you cannot take Japan, you cannot take UK, you cannot take Germany out. These are strong countries whose GDP the world depends on. So anything that affects to their gross domestic product, it has what? A triple effect on other economies. And we see unemployment as well going down. And once this begins to happen, it affects the stock market, and investors begin to withdraw their money or begin to exercise fear. But the stimulus package in relation to African countries, that's what I would like to pick up from what they did say. We've seen the United States giving out stimulus packages. We see Canada giving out, and Germany, of all the advanced countries, Germany packages are awesome. They are so systematic and so planned. But one thing that personally, and this is from my personal research and personal observation, that I think African countries had also tried more. I know we have a diverse research interest and people over here, but I'm talking from an African perspective. I believe that most African countries have been quite resilient and innovative when it comes to the handling of this. I came across a story of Senegal where they were using a 3D printer, right, to augment their ventilators. And when I saw that, I was like, this is very innovative. And also, when you go to South Africa, they are using a tracking system that they use for one of their parks for rhinos. And that's what they are using to track all the people who have been affected by COVID-19. Economic-wise as well, we see my own country, Ghana, right from the very beginning, we're wondering what would the president do? I was surprised that he came out and gave free water bills. Well, it might not be anything, but I believe that they acted within their strength, and most African countries so far they have really done well. Now, to round everything up, I want us to understand that globalization played a critical role. And the greatest debate, or the big debate now in the economy, in the global economy now, is will the world remain as it was, or it will go back to a different propositions where nationalists have been arguing for restrictions and trying to close borders. And as Mr. Shegun said, the world will never be the same. I believe that, but we cannot deny the fact that globalization had played a key role. What is globalization? That's the universal interdependence of nations. After COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, how will this impact the world? As Karl Marx did say, he said that globalization was an inevitable product of capitalism. And this is influenced by man's desire to settle everywhere, settle anywhere, and establish connections everywhere. So with such a desire to nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, and establish connections, we see that globalization has greatly impacted COVID-19. While it was the last week in December, that was when this coronavirus was first recorded in China. And in mid-January, we've seen its impact in Europe. By March, it's been declared a pandemic already and devastated a whole lot of economies. Now, what is the social impact on the economy? I'll mention that the short term, one thing that we have seen is the human rights violation. Human rights violation, as people had been locked down in their homes and people have been restricted. There have been on the social impact an increase in human rights. And you might be wondering, what is the importance of this to the global economy? It is very important. If people are psychologically impacted, guess what? Their productivity will go down. And also it has led to populism, which is accompanied by what? Xenophobia, where we have people, especially in the United States, we have the Chinese people being what? Being mocked at, being laughed at, and being what? Being tagged or stigmatized, which is very bad. The long term is a very positive one in the social impact, is that we all have a common faith. Now we understand that if there's anything to do, we have to come together to cooperate and also to what? To bring our hands together and fight this common enemy, which is coronavirus. Politically, what's the short-term effect? It led to the closure of borders, limitation of exports, and privatization as well, as you did mention. Now, most countries have what? Have not decided to produce their own PPEs, which I believe is a good policy that at least, as China is known to be the factory of the world, I believe that at least most countries should be able to produce the basic necessities within. And like PPEs is very, very, very essential. So privatization should go down on such issues, and then government should step in. Now, on the long term, right? On the long term, on political and legal impact, I believe it's going to affect the leadership of most presidencies. And what I mean by this is how most countries' leaders reacted to this in handling this economic crisis will impact their leadership qualities, and people will elect them when it comes to election based on how they responded to this. Now, on the economic front, I would like to mention that on the business-wise, as Mr. Shegun did mention, and I'll finalize on that part, it is very, very important that most businesses begin to think otherwise. There's a research that came out recently stating that after COVID, most services will go beyond or will scale up above manufacturing goods. Now, manufacturing goods and services are two separate things. And that's where most African countries have so much laid their hopes as today going through the industrialization process to grow, create more jobs so that the world will see us developing. But now with COVID, right, we have to understand that this might just be a dream. We have to invest much into the service sector, which is very, very, very important. And as we see, most of the companies that survive this, look at Zoom that we are using right now, right? It's got into what? The technology. Providing service is one thing that each businesses, each government must focus on when it comes to they having plans as to economic development, creating jobs, and having a good policy for their people. And lastly, the implication for developing countries. What are the implications? I remember very well that the president of Ghana did mention about the one district, one factory. There's a time to go over that particular policy and identify what kind of factories are you talking about? What kind of businesses are you talking about? And how would they stand should something happen again? Now, business adaptation, I already did mention that. Now you have to strategize your businesses again, make sure that you are what? Your presence online is very efficient. Now, skill development, which Mr. Shegun also did say, you have to learn coding. I am not a computer science person, but we all have to learn coding, and quantitative skills is very important. And lastly, universities, research institutions must also collaborate with other institutions all over the world from the African continent, have great collaborations. Through that, we'll be able to fight such an enemy on the global front.
All right. Thank you, sir, for the presentation. I have personally learned a lot. From this short presentation, the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. We will take one or two questions, and then it can be a question. It can also be a comment on the topic, not only question, but a contribution on the comment. Already, Mr. Afo would want to make a comment. So at this moment, we would invite Mr. Afo to also comment on this topic. But before that, let me introduce Mr. Afo. He is he's a teacher in DPSI, Delhi Public School, Private School International, Ghana. And he is the head of English department, the national coach of Spelling Bee Ghana. And he's also a content developer for teaching topics related to Spelling Bee. And he also trains the Ghanaian champions and prepares them for international finals in the USA. So that is Mr. Afo. That is a little bit about Mr. Afo. So we would invite him to make his comment. And then Mr. Labi will also make a comment. I will introduce him at the appropriate time. So Mr. Afo, you can make your comment.
Hello everybody and good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary platform. I must say, I'm very, very impressed with what I've heard so far. So I want to say congratulations to first Mr. Shadrach, and secondly to all the students. Well done. These are the things we need you to do to push the frontiers of developing the world. Before I know I have a session where I have to deliver what it is that I have, but I just want to point to a very intelligent question Mr. Daniel said also asked. And if I remember correctly, the question was, how do employers actually absorb university graduates, especially at a time when they didn't get to write the exit exams? Mr. Daniel, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, so Mr. Isijola answered the question extremely well, but I just want us to think about this. Even in the absence of COVID-19, we have situations in Ghana and indeed some African countries where thousands of university graduates are not able to get dream jobs, are not able to be absorbed into jobs. Now, we know that is a stark reality on us. Now that we have COVID-19 staring in our faces, I think that it's about time universities sat down and then started rethinking their mission and vision, especially with regard to the kind of pedagogy. When I say pedagogy, I mean the teaching they do. I, as a teacher, I've never believed in using exams as the, if you like, the main source of determining someone's faith. I believe that once a student sits under your feet as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a professor, You must teach the student in such a way that should anything happen, the student must find him or herself relevant in any society. So COVID or no COVID, I believe that the students who were just about to graduate should find themselves skilled enough to fit into society if the pedagogy is right. That's what I just wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. At this moment, we would invite Mr. Emmanuel Labi. He is the head of economics department, BPSI International. So, Mr. Emmanuel Labi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shadrach, for this opportunity. Mine is in the form of a question. And what I would like to know is what happens to the multiplier effect of the economy at large, and how does it narrow down to developed and developing economies as far as that effect on the global economy is concerned? That's my question. Yeah, the multiplier effect on the global economy, and then how it narrows down to developing and then developed economies. Yeah.
A-level exams question one.
Absolutely. This is an O-level exam. Yeah.
All right.
So
Okay.
I'll just give a perspective on that, and he being a teacher in that field as well.
Yeah, okay.
So as I did mention, for instance, like the PPE, right?
Yeah.
We realized that most developing countries, and not even developing countries, some developed countries, you will be surprised that even the United States was so much dependent on China for most of these things, right?
Yeah.
So now, what is the implication as we have this COVID coming from China as they close their borders, right? It's going to impact what? Trade, export. So if you depend on a country on that sort for your basic goods, then guess what? If they close their border, you're going to starve, or you're going to what? You're going to be affected. But could you imagine, right? I hope this will not go, but it came out publicly that even in this country, in the United States, the government even stopped the export of these PPEs. So disappointing. That yes, it's true, they are all struggling, but as we know America to assist first, they got to the point where the president told all these manufacturing companies, do not export any PPEs to any country. So when it gets to that point, you can imagine what the implications will be, right? So when it comes to the multiplier effect, that's how it's going to be. And when it comes to jobs, we know there are people who are in Ghana, right? But they are being employed by companies in the America or doing one thing or the other, consulting. So once there's such limitations, it ends up affecting them as well. So that's just an aspect of that due to time as well. Any other person can add to it.
All right.
Wow.
All right. All right. So maybe we'll take one question or a contribution, and then we'll move on to the next topic. All right. Very well. Very well. Mr. Daniel Gassama, we are very grateful for joining us and giving us your perspective on the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy. It's been really insightful. Thank you very much. If Mr. Henry Akwafo is around, he can send me a private message. Thank you very much. We want to move on to the next topic, that is the impact of COVID-19 on the climate. Impact of COVID-19 on the climate. We all hear of climate change and global warming and so on. So we want to look at the impact of COVID-19 on the climate. And we have Veronica and Carla to do this presentation. So you have the floor now.
Good evening to one and all. I am A.S. Garnica, and I'm presenting with my partner on the topic of the impact of COVID-19 on the climate.
The COVID-19 pandemic is wreaking havoc in countries across the globe, causing a global health crisis and forcing economies to slow down due to the strict quarantine measures. However, the outbreak has also impacted the environment in an intriguing way. As the pandemic spreads in different parts of the world, its consequences run farther than closed borders, scarce hand sanitizers, and social distancing protocols.
Climate change. So before we dwell deeper into the topic, let's first define climate change. So what is climate change? Climate change refers to the rise in average surface temperatures on Earth. These are some statistics from NASA about the climate change. 1. The Earth's global surface temperature in 2019 was the second warmest since modern record keeping began in 1880. 1.98 degrees Celsius warmer than 1851 to 1980 mean, according to an analysis by NASA. Globally, the average temperature of 2019 was second to that of 2016 and continued the planet's long-term warming trend. The past 5 years have been the warmest of the last 140 years.
Main contributors to climate change. 1. Water vapor. Water vapor is the most abundant greenhouse gas, but importantly, it acts as a feedback to the climate. 2. Carbon dioxide is the most important long-lived portion of climate change. 3. Methane. On a molecule-for-molecule basis, methane is far more active greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, but also one which is much less abundant in the atmosphere. 4. Nitrous oxide is a powerful greenhouse gas.
Consequences of changes in the climate. On average, Earth will become warmer due to the excess presence of greenhouse gases. Some regions may welcome warmer temperatures, but others may not. Warmer conditions will probably lead to more evaporation and precipitation overall, but individual regions will vary, some becoming wetter and others drier. A strong greenhouse effect will warm the oceans and partially melt glaciers, increasing the sea level.
Sunlight reaches the earth. Some energy is reflected back into space. Some is absorbed and re-radiated as heat. Most of the heat is absorbed by greenhouse gases and reflected in all directions, warming the earth.
The role of human activity. A group of 1,300 independent scientific experts from countries all over the world under the control of the United Nations concluded that there is more than 95% probability that human activities over the past 50 years have warmed our planet. So this graph over here shows how the temperature has increased from 1880 to 2013.
Effects of the virus. The CO2 emissions and human mobility have been reduced, which has improved air quality by 25%. The pandemic is a cataclysmic event so big and disruptive that it can be measured in the planetary metrics of climate change. As many as 2.6 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions, about 8% of the estimated total for the year, will never be emitted into the atmosphere, according to estimates by the International Energy Agency. Pick any world-shaking event from 20th century history, the Great Depression, World War II, the global financial crisis. None has produced a bigger decrease in emissions than the COVID-19 pandemic.
A study published in May 2020 found that the daily global carbon emissions during the lockdown measures in early April fell by 17% and could lead to an annual carbon emissions decline of up to 7%, which would be the biggest drop since World War II, according to the researchers.
This is China before the COVID-19 pandemic. And then this is China now as the air quality has reduced and CO2 emissions have also decreased.
Waste management. The huge demand for disposable medical products such as single-use gloves, surgical masks, and empty floor bags in the wake of the pandemic has created a deluge of medical waste. Plastic packaging is increasing during this coronavirus pandemic. Seen as a more sanitary option, a shopper in Europe spending on packaged food products is soaring. This is also putting workers employed at waste collection and disposable industry at a risk of contracting the virus. The waste is also polluting the land, clogging drainage systems, polluting the ocean with plastic and emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
In the United States, there's a surge in solid medical waste, which puts 467,000 waste collection workers at risk. Now, reusable bags are banned in several states, and 1 billion trees per year are needed to package shipped goods. In Italy, we have 111% increase in consumer spending on packaged mandarins. In China, we have medical waste quadrupled to 200 tons a day.
So, is the pandemic's impact positive or negative on the climate change issue? So basically, the air quality. Due to the coronavirus outbreak's impact on travel and industry, many regions and the planet as a whole experienced a drop in air pollution. Reducing air pollution can reduce both climate and COVID-19 risks. As a consequence of the unpredicted use of disposable face masks, a significant number of masks were discarded in the natural environment, adding to the worldwide burden of plastic waste. So, to conclude, the positive impact of the virus on climate outweighs the negative impact of the virus.
When we have problems, we always need to find solutions. So here are some solutions to curb climate change, as the solutions brought up by the COVID-19 lockdown are temporary. 1. There should be executable plans for proper waste management in each country, which includes recycling and using rubbish for biomass energy production. 2. Reforestation of the earth by planting more trees in each country.
So these are our resources where we actually got information to make our presentation more reliable. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Veronica and Carla, for your presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on the climate. And I must say it's a wonderful one. It's a very wonderful presentation. You've really done very well. Maybe we may take one or two questions for our students, and then we'll listen to the experts' view on the impact of COVID-19 on climate. Okay, I think today we want to spare our students. All right. So we would invite Mr. Henry Akwafo. He holds a master's degree in chemistry, organic chemistry, natural products, and currently doing his PhD in medicinal chemistry at the University of Ghana. He has some experience with environmental chemistry, and so I would invite Mr. Henry Akwafo to also give us his thoughts on the impact of COVID-19 on the climate, and then we would also listen to some contributions from all participants. So Mr. Henry Akwafo, you would talk now, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shadrach. Is it audible enough? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And then thank you, Veronica. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, but it's Veronica and then Karan, right?
Kala.
Yeah, Kala. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. With my introduction, clearly you see that I have a modicum of background as far as environmental and then things of the climate is concerned. Notwithstanding, I acknowledge such an apt presentation to the effect of the climate or the impact of the pandemic that we are all facing on the global economy. And so I'll just take some few highlights. I was just monitoring.
Sir, can you turn on your video for us, please? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Very well.
Okay, let me continue because I'm using my.
Very well, you can continue. You can continue. You can continue.
I really want to. Okay, yeah. So I just want to touch on some few points, but I was just monitoring my notes as you were flipping through your slide, and I must say that you have even exhausted what I've written down, but I'll tend to look at. And this information, I mean, none of us can escape. No part of this world can escape the dramatic decline in economic activity in the wake of this pandemic. But once you are talking about climate change, a major driving force for the climate changing with time, and then the problems that comes in the wake of the climate change is the use of fossil fuels. And now this contributes to about 85% of energy demand. So clearly, if you look at the heavily industrialized countries, my brother earlier mentioned, you can't talk of global economies and not mention the US, the China, the Japan, and Germany, amongst others. And so these economies, even though now they are trying to use mixed energy sources, notwithstanding, still fossil fuel is about 85% of the energy demand. And so clearly once in the wake of the pandemic, with the shutting down of industries, companies, and whatever, the demand for fossil fuel reduced drastically. And then in the history, over 2 decades, the prices of crude oil came below $30 a barrel. And so clearly, the fall in fossil fuel use reduced the pollution we normally face. And then the greenhouse gases that are emitted once we are using these fossil fuels reduced. So like you clearly presented, in the wake of the shutdown, some part of China in February resulted in about 25% decline in carbon dioxide emission. And then you can see that the atmosphere was clear in a very long time. I think Germany reported a similar incident where in the wake of the pandemic and because industries have shut down, I mean, the air was cleared of the gases, the particles, and then again, you see that once the cars are not moving, now you drive through town and traffic has sort of come down, except in the wake of this easing of restrictions. And so it's more like we are coming back to normal. So like you rightly concluded again, the gains from this pandemic could be a silver lining as far as the climate aspect is concerned. But then these gains which we are boasting of, I mean, can we consolidate these gains in the long term? Because as restrictions, are being eased around the globe, where travel restrictions, companies, industries can start working. Because don't forget, most governments have already been saying that, yeah, this pandemic is something that we have to learn and adopt to live by it. So what it means is that we are going to reinvigorate, we are going to start most economies. And so once all these engines are started, clearly we are going to erode the gains we have made in this very short time, despite the fact that in this very short time too, the gains as far as the climate is concerned are so dramatic. For instance, like you mentioned, a prediction of 8%. I mean, that is huge. If you are looking at that in terms of the amount of carbon dioxide that, that has hit her to being refused or being taken out of the system, that's over 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So that should tell you. And so once these industries are coming back to work, and of course, a lot of people are out of jobs, and I believe personally that it's because most of these companies are not working. In China, it has been reported recently that with the lifting of these restrictions, I mean, the gains, the air, the atmosphere is being polluted again. Also, if we look at the global greenhouse gas emission, which they have predicted that it must fall 7.6% every year between 2020 to 2030 to keep temperatures increasing to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so is this target attainable in the face of the heavily industrialized nations? Once you are talking about these heavily industrial nations, of course, Africa is not heavily industrialized. And once Africa is pushing for industrialization, once you are talking about climate change, Africa doesn't seem to contribute much, but we all face the consequences of other activities even happening several miles away from Africa. And so nobody is immune to the impacts of the climate. Wherever you are, like this pandemic, it's also more like a global emergency. And so are we able to get this 7.6% reduction and even below every year between 2020 to 2030? And then again, every year that the greenhouse emissions are above zero, atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations continue to build. And then this increases the risk that even incremental increases could trigger feedback loops. And this will result in outsized and permanent damage to the climate. This is a report according to a farmer and his workers in 2019. And so we have chalked some success, and this should be, this should have been the normal. But is it possible to go back in the wake of when every government, because people are complaining that we have to revive and then drive the economy? And this should tell you that the industries, the companies, the chemical processing, the pharmaceutical, the chemical plant, and all of it looks like, they form a very huge base in most economies. We talked about production of PPEs. They all have their accompanying effect on the climate. But to that aspect, see, one thing we should focus on and we should push in terms of research and development. I don't know whether we are producing climate efficient or climate friendly mask. It looks like all the plastics for disposable deliveries which are being produced, are these things friendly to the environment if they are being produced in such numbers? And so you see that lockdown, all right, but it seems that we are rather aggravating and exacerbating the problem at hand. And so can we look at, is there a way that we can look at which materials we use in producing these disposables, these disposable plastics? And somewhere, yeah, places like Germany and Europe, I mean, using plastics has been banned to a certain degree. But if you come to Ghana, I mean, we have a sanitation issue. And then if you look at when you see any garbage, in terms of percentage, clearly the plastic waste will constitute more than 70%. So we have an issue of a plastic problem. And I think this is true for most African countries. I know Kenya is doing something right. Again, in terms of energy, you know, more important than the short-run impact on emissions are the impact on investment in clean energy, such as the renewable, of course. Now, falling energy demand means sharp reductions in the growth of installed wind, solar, and battery capacity. This is frightening because, you know, one of the ways to resolve this climate or to mitigate this climate change is resolving to using renewable energy sources. And most countries are trying that, resorting to wind, solar, and battery and other renewable. Even though, yeah, the use of crude or petroleum-based fuels are also being used in certain places. But if you come to Africa, you know, for instance, South Africa in 2013, there was this publication. They projected that by 2020, they should be using, in terms of their energy mix, they should be using like 20% of renewable energy. But they have not realized half of that target. So this is a big problem. And as Africa is looking forward to industrializing, you know, don't forget Africa, I mean, it's been estimated we have a very high population growth rate. And so as we are increasing in numbers, as we are stretching leaps and bounds, you know, people need to have light and energy as we are seeking 1D, one district, one factory. What are the energy sources that we are going to use? So we must be critically talking about the energy situation if we are mindful of the climate. And then lastly, because you have said everything, we need this political will, and then it should be collaborative. The way we are seeing this COVID-19 as a global emergency, if governments and nations and continents will acknowledge, you know, if they will recalibrate their sense of omnipotence, you know, some are assuming that this climate change is a hoax. The impact of climate change are living with us, and it's not getting any better. And so the collaborative in terms of governments coming together to institute policies, you know, policies to advance the friendliness of whatever activities they are doing. And I believe one of the means is to resorting, and then we need to put in funding into research and development. The fear is that, you know, now that, well, the crude oil prices are even going up, but as companies are coming back, you know, it is more expensive sometimes to use this solar, wind, and then other renewable energies. Starting the installation and then switching to them are expensive. So if companies have gone through this pandemic and are coming back, if they have to be making profit in the meantime, what it means is that they are never going to resort to using clean energy. They have to, of course, use the very cheap one so they can be in business. Then again, you know, the prior to this pandemic, I think 2018, 2019, I mean, there have been huge calls there have been climate calls around the globe with even students, teenagers advocating for government to implement policies that will safeguard the continent or the globe. But I see that because of this pandemic, these talks or these negotiations are going to be pushed to the background because they may not be of priority to governments because they want to revive and resuscitate economies. But we need to still keep that conversation ongoing because the climate is deteriorating, and then a few years to come, it may not be habitable or cannot sustain wildlife and then human life. And so we need to continue the conversation. And so we need to, like I already said, that you have government negotiations setting up funds. Africa, I don't know if there's a fund, which we have individual countries contributing to climate change research. I know there are some, but most often these are coming from the Western environment. So to conclude, the climate change is real, but we have seen some improvements as far as the carbon dioxide pollutions and the emissions of some of these greenhouse gases across the heavily industrialized places. But then with the easing of restrictions, it looks like these gains are very short term, even though within the meantime, we have seen some improvements as far as the carbon dioxide amount, which prior to this may have been released into the environment.
Very
I think I would want to pause here. Thank you.
Very well, very well. Thank you very much, Mr. Henry, for such a superb presentation on the topic of impact of COVID-19 on the climate. Looking at your background from organic chemistry, diving into environmental chemistry, I think that's a superb one. And then to also our students, Carla and Veronica, I mean, the statistics, the data, so on point. Congratulations, guys. We will take one question and then we'll move on to the last but one presentation for the day. If there's a question, I have a question. Maybe the students can take it up if they are okay. The expert can also take it if it's fine. Would you advocate? I know the people in business and economics may come after me, but then I will still ask my question. Will you advocate that maybe every year we shut down countries for, let's say, a week? Will you advocate? Because the impact of the climate can have an effect on the respiratory system or the health of people. And we are talking about productivity. We are talking about economic growth. If the people are not well, can we have this economic growth? Would you advocate for that? So maybe Mr. Henry can take that, and then a student can also add their perspective, and then we'll move on to the next question. The next presentation. Thank you. So, sir, what's the view?
Yeah, so you are asking whether we can advocate for a meeting. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, a meeting with the business world.
No. What I mean is that, will you advocate that maybe once a year we shut down the country for, let's say, 5 days, let's say 1 week, to preserve our climate? Because we realized that when the restrictions came, there was a better improvement. The emissions of carbon dioxide and some of these toxic emissions decreased drastically. So would you advocate, bearing in mind the economic consequences?
Yes. So thank you. I think that could be one option. For instance, like I said, you see that Africa is not heavily industrialized. So when we talk about, um, in terms of the purity of the air around, most of it, apart from the thermal enclaves, but once we have a proper planning where industries are positioned where they are not of much of a threat to more of the citizens, then again, it's the issue of, how well industrialized are. For instance, in the wake of this pandemic, almost all nations, everybody is trying to do it yourself. So if we can do something by ourselves on a smaller scale, such that, note that you can't totally occlude or prevent industries from running or producing products. We certainly need this product for our personal comfort, for life to continue. And so if China were producing just for Chinese, right? If Ghana is able to produce enough for us, such that we don't have to import. So China is not looking just at Chinese citizens. China is looking beyond its borders. How it's producing to export to Europe, to US, and now Africa is their market. So on the scale of production is it's commensurate with the proportions of these gases that are released. And so we can think of producing ourselves just enough so that this pollution rate will come down. Then again, it is the sort of energy that we are using to produce. So for instance, if China is using clean energy for their production, right? And then where these appropriate mechanisms are put in place to even purify these gases before they are released, you have some chemistry background, so you may appreciate this better. So yeah, we may need to have that conversation.
Very well.
But just so we can explain to some in the field, once they appreciate this knowledge, I think they will buy in. But then once they are there just to make profits, I think our businesses should begin to have conscience. And then they must have our health at heart. I think this is my position. Yeah.
Very well. That's excellent. Veronica, Carla, would you want to add a point before we move on to our next topic, the last but one? Oh, you are okay. Okay, all right. So before we move on to the next topic, that is the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare systems of developing and developed nations, I want to notify the House that we have Mrs. Belinda Jijom-Kole, who is a pediatric nurse resident around. At the appropriate time, when our students are done with the presentation, she would also share her views on the topic. So we would welcome Shriman Jha and Dushan to between 5 to 7 minutes because of our time to do their presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare system. Remember, we have that of education, and our principal is there to also give his views. I mean, an experienced educationist. We also have Mr. Fo, Mr. Daniel, and some of our teachers around. So thank you very much for staying online up to this time. I know it's been very educative, and you wait till we finish. Thank you very much. So Shriman Jha, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Shadrach sir, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dushan from grade 9A, IGCSE DPS International.
And I am Srimanja from DPS International, grade 9.
And today we are going to present on the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare system of developing and developed countries. So there are 4 main topics in our presentation. The first one is impact of COVID-19 on the world. And secondly, we'll go specifically to developing countries and how they are getting affected. Then we'll also look from the side of developed countries. And at last, we'll look at the positive side effect of COVID-19 to the world. Before we begin with our presentation, let us have some insight into what COVID-19 is. COVID-19 is an infectious disease which is from a newly discovered strain of coronavirus. Some of the main symptoms are fever, dry cough, and tiredness. Countries are preventing the disease by social distancing and quarantine. This virus has severely disrupted several healthcare facilities of the world.
"40 million people, that many people could die worldwide from coronavirus unless we see an urgent intervention. This fact is according to Imperial College of London. We could see the biggest humanitarian disaster since World War II unfold. Out of 197 countries in the world, 188 countries are infected by this COVID-19. As of 18th June 2020, there were 8.6 million cases, 450,000 deaths, and 4.5 million recoveries. The effect of this novel coronavirus is so severe that even the best and the largest healthcare facilities are now calling for donations. Whether developed or developing, each country has had its share of this heinous virus. Preventions and treatment services for non-communicable diseases, NCDs, have been severely disrupted since the COVID-19 pandemic began, according to a WHO survey. The survey, which was completed by 155 countries during 3 weeks in May, explained that this situation is of significant concern because people living with NCDs are at higher risk of severe COVID-19 related illness and death. The results of this survey confirm what we have been hearing from countries for several weeks now, said Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization. Many people who need treatment for diseases like cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and diabetes have not been receiving health services and medicines since the COVID-19 pandemic began. However, countries must find innovative ways to ensure that these essential services for NCDs continue, even as they fight COVID-19. It is also confirmed that the impact is global, but that low-income countries are most affected.
Difference between developed and developing countries. What is a developing country? A developing country is a poor agricultural country that is seeking to become more advanced economically and socially. And on the other hand, developed country is an industrialized country or more economically developed country, and it's a sovereign state that has a developed economy and advanced technology. As you see in the picture, darker color represent more developed countries, whereas lighter color represent less developed countries. Examples for developed countries include United Kingdom, USA, and France, whereas examples of developing countries include Zimbabwe, Burundi, and Afghanistan, among others.
Most developed countries depend on a conventional medical healthcare model that uses doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and other professionals to deliver medication and surgeries to help make people healthier. A developing country, on the other hand, is more likely to use a naturopathic system. A naturopathic system is more focused on the wellness of treating the whole person. A simple example to illustrate this concept would be the example of high blood pressure. A conventional medical doctor might prescribe medications to lower blood pressure, whereas a naturopathic healer may suggest diet and exercise changes or even herbal remedies to prevent this.
Impact on developing countries. In Zimbabwe, doctors and nurses working in public hospitals went on strike weeks ago over the lack of PPE. PPE means personal protective equipment, such as sanitizer, goggles, helmet for other government or equipment designed to protect them while treating patients. There is no sign they will return to work anytime soon. Medics in Kenya and Nigeria face a similar situation. Ethiopia had just 3 hospital beds per 10,000 people in 2015, according to the WHO. The Central African Republic has 3 ventilators in total, and in Zimbabwe, doctors have reported doing bare-handed surgery for lack of gloves. The World Health Organization put Nigeria's doctor-to-population ratio at 0.3 per thousand population, which is grossly inadequate. According to 2015 WHO data, the doctor-to-patient ratio in Liberia is even worse, 51 doctors for Liberia's population of 4.5 million. Ethiopia has 0.2 doctors per thousand, and Uganda has 0.12 doctors per thousand inhabitants. Also, developed countries are in the battle against economic losses, so are taking it as an excuse to limit funding to less developed countries. According to Madhukar Pai, the director of McGill Health Program, for developing countries with much larger population at risk, fewer resources, and less capacity, the pressure to develop innovative approaches, test them quickly, and deliver them at a scale is especially great.
But even with the best infrastructures and medical development in the world, developed parts of the world are the most hit by this pandemic. Right now, the major thing we should focus on is reducing death rates. If we have higher contaminations, it is less fatal than having a higher death rate. If we consider this picture, it displays the top 10 countries in order of number of deaths per population. The source of this picture is from worldometer.info/coronavirus. If we notice carefully, all the top 10 countries in this category are developed countries and have one of the highest death rates in the world. Also, there is a lot of pressure on medical facilities, as there are a lot of people going to doctors for testing, quarantining, treatment, and other tasks. As a result, again, the people with non-communicable diseases will not receive treatment, which can be potentially more harmful. However, as a result of this pandemic, people are becoming more conscious about their health and are verging into several health improvement techniques such as exercise, healthy diet, yoga, and several others, which in the long run is going to improve the well-being of people and eventually make the world healthier. As cities and in some cases entire nations are in lockdown, Earth-absorbing satellites have detected a significant decrease in the concentration of common air pollutant, nitrogen dioxide, which enters the atmosphere through emissions from cars, trucks, buses, and power plants. According to an analysis by Marshall Brook, a professor in Stanford's Earth System Science Department, a pandemic-related reduction in particulate matter in atmosphere, the deadliest form of air pollution, has likely saved the lives of 4,000 young children and 73,000 elderly adults in China over these 2 months of this year. Also, there is a significant decrease in noise pollution. Even several hospitals are being built in short periods, which is improving the healthcare infrastructure. For example, China built a hospital within 10 days, and Ghana's president, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, announced to build 100-bed hospitals in 6 weeks. Most importantly, it has broken the human ego of sufficiency. Even the most developed countries require more hospitals, more doctors, more nurses, more medicines, and more of everything that makes our life healthier. Finally, in this slide, we will discuss some betterments and suggestions about the COVID-19. The first lesson we should learn from this pandemic is that it is not enough to fight one disease outbreak. We have to build systems that can prevent next ones. As Bill Gates in Munich Security Conference 2017 said, to fight global pandemic, we must fight poverty too. But the good news is that advances in biotechnology, new vaccines and drugs can help epidemics from spreading out of control. But first and most importantly, we have to make a new arsenal of weapons, which is vaccines, drugs, antibiotics, and diagnostics. However, the irony is that the cost of ensuring adequate pandemic preparedness worldwide is estimated at $3.4 billion a year. Yet, the projected annual loss from pandemic could run as high as $570 billion. Also in future pandemics, the world needs to ensure rehabilitation centers should not be disturbed. Rather, we should make special centers for these diseases. Vaccines can especially be important in containing epidemics and pandemics. But today, it typically takes 10 years to develop and license a new vaccine, which is way too long. To significantly curb deaths from a fast-moving pathogen, we have to get down that to considerably 90 days or less. To conclude, I would like to say a simple fact. If you have your health intact, you can save everything, from businesses to economy to even the climate. I mean literally everything. Thank you.
Wow, wow, magnificent. The presentation on, the presentation is on point. And congratulations to Sherman Jah and Dushan for such a superb presentation. I'm so excited that at this your age and at this your level, you could do, to all the students, you could do such an in-depth presentation. It's excellent. Keep it up. Would ask 1 or 2 questions. If there's no question, then we'll listen to the expert's view, a brief one, the impact of COVID-19 on the healthcare system. She is a nurse, a pediatric nurse. Okay, so she will give us her perspective on the topic. And so if there's a question, you kindly notify me, and then we'll ask our student before I introduce our next speaker. Remember, we have the last topic, that is impact of COVID-19 on education, and then we'll bring the curtains down for the program. Any question for our students? Okay, so I will then introduce the speaker, the expert on healthcare system. She's a nurse by name, Madame Belinda Dijom Kole. She's a pediatric nurse. J. John, very sorry. J. John Colley, she's a pediatric nurse resident and also a nurse preceptor, quality improvement initiatives, adolescent advocate, social worker. Wow. So ma'am would give you the opportunity to also give your perspective on this topic. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm very impressed with the presentations that I've observed so far, and most especially for my team on the impacts of COVID-19 on the healthcare system. That was a very brilliant one. I would only highlight on some few points. And so first of all, would have to look at what health is and then why this has really made a hit on us, and then the components of the healthcare system, and then the various aspects that has been affected. Of course, we know health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So you could have a situation, not necessarily a disease that is impacting on one's health, and of course the health system at large. And then what has COVID-19 done? My group had already defined what COVID-19 is. We all know that it's a new type of virus, a coronavirus that just hits the world by surprise. I say by surprise because we weren't expecting it, and it has impacted the various components of the healthcare system. That is the service delivery aspect, the workforce, our health information system, our health financing, the leadership and governance, and of course, the very essential commodities that we use, that is the medical products and logistics that we use in delivering the services. And we can also recall that when this virus started in the developed countries, for instance, China had to put in various strategies, as in the first lockdown, and then put up a new infrastructure just to meet the demands, because they had lots of cases cropping up and they needed to expand those areas to help take care of persons that were infected. And this is a very it was a very strategic position that China took. And although we've had several people dying, at least there has been a decline somehow in the rate of death, because we've had some improved we've had some infrastructure being put up to help take care of cases that were not actually being seen or treated in the hospital. And we also realize that in the developed countries, there's been a shift from face-to-face contact with healthcare providers to the telehealth system, where the clients would have to sort of more like a virtual consultation, where doctors or nurses would have to provide healthcare service to patients who are in need, and then they go for their prescriptions unless they would have to visit the hospitals. So what is happening in the developing world? And I would just go straight to our country, Ghana. We've also put in some measures. We've had our own share of the lockdown, and we've seen how from the presentations made by those from the climate zone, those are presented on the impact of COVID on climate, you realize that although there was a situation, the carbon monoxide that was being danced up in the system to some extent had reduced. Like, I'm just making deductions from what they presented, and this has had a positive impact on the health of most people. And we've also heard our president coming up with some various restrictions, the social distancing and wearing of face masks and the likes. So what's Hello.
Hello, go ahead. Hello, go ahead. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, please talk. We can hear you.
Hello. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, let me send a message. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, please. I've sent you a message. Yeah, we can hear you.
Wow. I can't hear
Okay,
anyone.
So,
Hello.
Let me call her. We can hear her.
Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. All right. Very sorry about that. She'll join us in a jiffy. Hello, are you there? We can hear you. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Kindly go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Hello.
All right.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
as even in the developed countries, there had been pressure on the healthcare professionals, our infrastructure. We've recorded some hospitals closing up because the infection rate got so high that most professionals were being infected and would require fumigations. That happened in some hospitals in Ghana. And then we've also seen some workforce burnouts because the system had been overwhelmed with lots of cases. And this is something that we weren't actually prepared for. It was just like a blow that hit us. And for developing countries like Ghana, for instance, where our health infrastructure is not up to the level of the developing world, who are even in dying need, you realize that it has had a toll on us. We've had some centers being designated to cater for these cases. So because of these inadequacies, we've had some centers being designated for these cases. We have a call center that is the 112 emergency line where you call in if you feel that you are sick or you're suspecting that you're having the virus. You call in, and then the necessary guidelines will be given to you if you have to pick you up from your own house and all that. Yeah, so those were the strategies that were put in place. Moving forward, I think you've highlighted on that. We need to be apt, we need to project into the future. We need to develop our capacity as healthcare professionals to be prepared for emergencies or pandemics as this. We need to scale up our medicine production, vaccines, and the likes. So I think that is just it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you. I'm not getting the feedback.
Okay, so
Hello?
I'm going to, sorry, you can't hear us. I'm going to give you a call whilst we have our meeting. So kindly, yeah, please hold on. Whilst you are connected to the Zoom now, so don't worry. So you can just hold on whilst we continue. So we are grateful, Ma'am, for the presentation. Even though you cannot hear us, but we can really hear you well. And by the way, she was my mate in senior high school. and the husband is a doctor, a medical doctor based in the US. So that is just by the way. I have a question, and then we'll move on to our final presentation for the day. I know our teachers are ready to also share their perspective. We are talking about wearing of masks. Have we considered the healthcare of children? Have we considered the healthcare of children? Because we talk about using sanitizers, using nose masks. Do we see children wearing nose masks? Or have we sidelined children? Since you are a pediatric nurse, I think you'll be in the best position to comment on that particular topic. All right. Please, can you, hello? Okay, I want to find out, please. Yeah, but are you still connected to the Zoom? Okay, let me find out from my people if they can hear you. Please, can you hear ma'am?
No.
Hello, Mr. Alfo, can you hear ma'am?
No, now, no, now.
Not now, okay,
Then,
all right.
Then we could hear, but no.
Okay, so can you talk now on the phone? Let me put you on loudspeaker, just a moment. Okay, all right. Yeah, please, can you hear her now? Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, please go on. Let's manage with this, and then we'll move on to the last one.
This is very sad.
Okay, ma'am, we are sorry. Okay, guys, I'll summarize whatever she's saying, please. I'm sorry. Okay, all right, very well, very well, very well, very well. So I want to summarize what she said. So she's also looking at the health aspect of the mask. Okay, it can also affect the children. So what she said is that parents have a role in making sure that the children are also protected. For example, you cannot take your child to a place where, a crowded place. Whatever steps you are taking, you make sure that you also have the child's health in mind. She also agreed that, in fact, it's an emergency. And so maybe with time, measures will be taken to also consider the health of children. I think Mr. Henry has a point. Once he makes it, we would have to go on. So just a minute, 1 minute for Mr. Henry, and then we'll move on to the last topic because of time.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I wanted to talk about is the fact that we can't divorce the pharmaceutical part of the health system. It's directly part of what goes on in the health system. And talking about in the African context, it's very sad that if you talk about drug discovery or making drugs, it's talk of vaccine formulation. it's very sad that in Africa, I don't think you can talk about drug development. And so most of our pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies, what they do is mostly formulation. Most of them buy the active ingredients and they do formulation. And those are the basic drugs. But if you talk of a proper drug development, it's more like it doesn't exist on the African continent. So I think to our business people, because this aspect of the health is money intensive. So
all right, very well. Thank you, Mr. Henry, for the contribution. I think Mom is here, but then because of time, I have summarized what she said. Maybe she will have a last word when we are done with the last presentation. So thank you, Mrs. Belinda Colley. And then Mr. Henry, thank you for the contribution. And also congratulations to Sherman and Dushan for such a wonderful presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare system. The data, the references, so on point. All right, so we move on to the final topic, the impact of COVID-19 on education, impact of COVID-19 on education. Global education, we also narrow it down. We are an institution, an educational institution, and we are glad to have our principal here. We are also glad to have Mr. Afo, who will also make a comment, who also, make some statements, and then Mr. Daniel Osedanso, who also make some statements on the impact of COVID-19 on education. Our students have felt it, teachers have felt it, management have felt it. What is the impact of COVID-19 on education? At this moment, I would invite Zara, Nabila, and Daniel to Ajanku to do their presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on education. That is our last topic for the day.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Daniel Ajanku of DPSI, Grade 9A, and I'm here with my partner.
Zara from Grade 9A DPSI.
Can you speak louder? Zara, please speak louder. Everyone, you should speak louder, okay? Thank you.
And I'm Zara Nasamu from Grade 9A DPSI.
We are here to present on the effects of COVID-19 on education. What is COVID-19? Before we get into the definition of the COVID-19, I'd just like to say the COVID-19, that's not the name, that's just an abbreviation. The CO stands for corona, the VI stands for virus, and the D stands for disease. 19 just represents the year 2019. COVID is an ongoing pandemic that is affecting all countries around the world and the health of various citizens. It is a disease named by the WHO caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time as it mutated and evolved from animals. It's very contagious and spreads through droplets of saliva containing the virus, mainly through the air. COVID-19 can be spread through all bodily fluids such as blood, saliva, mucus, breast milk, or semen. Our topic was the effects of COVID-19 on education. So what is education? Education is the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, beliefs, or habits. Educational methods include teaching, training, storytelling, discussion, and directed research. Everyone has the right to education. The right to education is guaranteed in Ghana's 1992 Constitution, which states in Article 38 that the government shall, within 2 years after Parliament first meets, after coming into the force of the Constitution, draw up a program for the implementation within the following 10 years for the provision of free compulsory universal basic education. What was the world like before the virus worsened it? To be more direct, what was the educational world like before the virus worsened it? In Somalia, poverty struck. The poverty levels in Somalia are so high that people cannot afford the resources and materials needed for proper education in Somalia. In Eritrea, human rights infringement is hindering a lot of people and restricting them from getting their basic rights to education. In Haiti, there's inadequate public finance. This means they're not really allocating their resources well enough. Thus, the educational system does not have money to build schools or to pay teachers well. Thus, they do not teach to their best potentials. In Sierra Leone, the birth rates are so high. This is mainly in the teenage sector, which means a lot of girls are getting pregnant. Them getting pregnant is restricting them from getting adequate education. In Sudan, there's war and conflict. Many people fear for their lives and cannot even leave their homes to go to school. The wars have also destroyed a lot of schools. As we know, today's children are quite smart and will do good to our various nations someday. But this virus is threatening to hinder the educational systems of various countries as schools have to close down. This is a big global issue that needs to be dealt with. This reminds me of a quote by Chuck Berry. The quote says, "Of the 5 most important things in life, health is first, education or knowledge is second, wealth is third. I forget the other 2. This basically trying to say that in life, the best things you can do to yourself is to have the best health or the best education. These 2 go hand in hand. They are so important that he has even forgotten the other 2. How has the world been able to improvise? The world has evolved in a way that has enabled communication virtually. That is Zoom, what we are using right now. Skype is also used. My mom personally uses an app called Team for business meetings. Social apps like Discord or House Party are used in teenage gatherings to discuss homeworks or other group projects. This has been a great part of our modern lives even before the pandemic. People have been able to communicate, discuss, and learn through these social platforms. Online communication.
All right, go ahead.
Final year students are more risk. There are lots of advantages and merits that final year students have. Some advantages that final year students have are that if they possess a good internal assessment, they won't have to deal with examination pressure, and they'll just pass their exams. Like if they have a good assessment, they can get into good schools without having to really endure that examination pressure. And students who may have failed during the exam or had no hope in even passing the exam at all will now have a bit of hope because their class marks can make up for it.
Very well. Zara is online, so Zara would continue from there, from the demerits.
Thank you.
The demerits or disadvantages of final year students during this coronavirus period is students have spent so much time studying for their exams and wasted precious time preparing for final year exams to move on in their lives. But then the coronavirus has interrupted with exams that have been taken publicly in schools. So students have to stay home and aren't allowed to go outside and go to their schools to take the exams. Students with poor test scores and low internal assessment marks, which consequently leads to lower GPA are also at risk of failing. Since the exams aren't to be taken publicly in schools, most teachers are using the internal assessment marks or test scores the students have accumulated in classrooms to give them their final grade to move on. But as most students who have failed tests or have low internal assessment marks have low GPA scores are at risk of failing.
All right, is that the last slide? You're done. Okay, thank you very much for.
No, we aren't done.
Very well. Very well.
Okay. Please hold on. Final year students, non-final year students are actually better off. This is because final year students are taking one of the most important exams that they'll be taking in a while. Whilst, for example, if you're a final year student, this exam is going to determine which schools you get into, the type of education you get, and maybe determine what job you get. But for a non-final year student, if they use your internal assessment and it's very poor, but you still manage to get to the next class, you still have the chance to learn harder, and do better in your final year exam. The presidential decree. The president of Ghana made a presidential decree concerning the coronavirus and how students have to deal with not going to school. And I quote, all universities, senior high schools, and basic schools, that is both private and public schools, will be closed on Monday, 16th March, till further notice. However, BEC and WASI candidates will be allowed to attend school to prepare for their examinations, but with prescribed social distancing protocols. The virtual learning environment. Though to some people, the virtual learning environment is better, in general, the virtual learning environment is more harmful than the physical classroom. This is because during tests or exercises, students have the freedom to turn off their cameras, even for a second, and they can use this chance to copy. Students can also have access to 24/7 internet, which they can use to cheat on tests, so they'll not be really encouraged to learn. But in the physical classroom, you're invigilated, constantly. And at home, you have the distractions of your television and of other social media. Flexibility of learning. The flexibility of learning is restricted during the online classes because the students may decide to attend the class or not. They can just decide to turn off their cameras, turn off their speakers, and then just sit somewhere and play video games. But in the physical classroom, you are literally being watched. The fact is, we are not facing just one virus. We are facing a species of viruses. The reality is that the world is being faced with a pandemic that is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This is a specific virus under the coronavirus species. The coronavirus species contains other viruses which may cause other diseases. So let's please stay safe. In a nutshell, COVID is a deadly fast-spreading disease affecting our educational system greatly. Some previous problems were poverty in Somalia, wars in Sudan, net birth rates in Sierra Leone. I would like to once again state that health and education go hand in hand. One cannot go without the other. Also, final year students are more affected than the average student. Virtual learning has made it more possible for some form of education to continue, but it does come with its disadvantages. Danke, that is thank you in German. Thank you for your time. I'm Daniel Ajanku, and my partner is Zara Nabila Nasamu.
Very well, very well. Thank you for your presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on education. At this moment, we would listen to, or we'll take the expert's view uh, on the topic. And then we have here with us Mr. David Raj. He is the principal of DPSI International. He's a man who has been in education for several years. He has great experience in education. And currently, DPSI is the best A-level school in Ghana, British Council. And so this is the brain, this is the man behind it. He has a lot of experience. So at this moment, we would hear a word or two from our dear principal, sir, Mr. David Raj. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening,
Today,
sir.
for first time, when I was, as usually every day, whenever there's some meeting or a workshop, it's me who speaks a lot and hear very little. But today, when I've been a silent observer all this time, I was just watching everyone, hearing everyone, and watching everyone with as a proud principal. I'm so happy that Mr. Shadrach took this initiative, and these children have really worked out, and even all the other invited guests who have been contributing. I've been just listening all this time. It was so full of information. It was so good. And really happy with all those going so far. Now coming on the point, talking about this effect on education, I can only tell so much that when we initially heard of the thing called lockdown and all those things, I, as a principal, got into a panic. Immediately, we sat down with the IT people and thought, how do we go about and what do we do now? But I'll tell you one thing. It's only coping up with the situation. We did not have any setback. Immediately, we started adapting to so many things like Zoom classes. Activities started going on. Academics started moving forward. Then we thought, why not music, art and craft, and physical education? And we got that also into action. I was recently listening to a preacher speaking in one of the churches in India. He was talking about the thing, like, a person who is perfectly healthy suddenly becomes blind. Suddenly becomes blind in both the eyes, can't see anything. For some days, his life is shut. He doesn't know how to go about. But then he starts coping up even with those disabilities which he has and starts working out very perfectly. Even for us during this pandemic, initially everything got shut. If you see, now people have started opening up. I even heard about economy. I heard about the businesses. But according to me, I know so much that along with this pandemic, the things are going to surely come back, bounce back. We will surely know how to cope up with all those. Some of the universities have opened up. They have started having social distancing. They have split the classes into two halves. They have morning session, evening session, with all precautions kept everywhere. And always they are given a warning and instructions of how to stay about it. So people will know, because as long as the vaccines don't come, this COVID-19 is going to stay with us. But that doesn't mean we shut our doors and shut down and stay. No, we know we'll come back combating it. We'll know how to cope up with all those things. And everything will start showing. If I take a little interest in share markets, I've seen the markets which suddenly slashed down have again started growing, very clearly indicating that the things have started, maybe initially in a slow pace, but then I know everything is going to bounce back and come back And we are surely going to cope up with all these things with ease. See, like, even if you watch, I see a lot of WhatsApp sharings. I even see 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old talking so much about coronavirus, talking so much about COVID-19, talking about all the precautions which they should take. So when everyone is becoming conscious of how to stay away from this particular thing, we can get back into action. I know the economics, economy, the business, the education will surely bounce back, and we'll make sure that nothing puts us behind. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the contribution. This is the man and his team behind the DPS virtual classes, the Zoom. I mean, sir has really contributed a lot, and we are very grateful. I want you to also know that we have Tanya Ma'am here, and she will make the last comment before we end the meeting, our first lady. And so without much ado, I would want to invite Mr. Afol. I've already introduced him. He's the head of the English department and a content developer of Spelling Bee Ghana, and also the coach of the winners. He prepares them and trains them for the international competition in the USA. So we'll invite Mr. Afo to make his submission. Sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Sir Shadrach, and good evening, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, students. I am almost in tears listening to students who sit under our feet to listen to us on a daily basis. I'm so impressed. This evening, I'm making a promise that once school reopens, we will sit down, talk, and then make sure we send this live on TV, on my TV show.
Very well.
Please remind me, let's talk about it.
Very
the
well.
world should hear these students deliberate this. This is very, very important. Please remind me. I'll present my live TV show, the platform for these students to share their knowledge with other students.
Very well.
So thank you very much, students. We are very proud of you. I just want to be very brief because it's almost raining around my area. So let's start with a few statistics. As of the 6th of May 2020, over 177 countries worldwide had closed down their schools. I've been directed to speak specifically on the impact of COVID-19 on education. And that's exactly what I promise I'm going to make it very brief. So as of 6th May 2020, over 177 countries worldwide had closed down their schools. And this actually impacted negatively the lives of 1.2 billion learners across the world. Students of DPS are no exception. We also suffered from this. Secondly, according to the Human Rights Watch, about 1.5 billion students stopped school due to COVID-19, have stopped. Thirdly, in Ghana specifically, about 9.2 million basic school students. And when I say basic school, I mean kindergarten, primary, and JHS, not forgetting SHS students, have been forced out of school, and this is by UNESCO. Now, if you listen to all these statistics, nobody should tell you that the impact of COVID-19 has been more disastrous than helpful. So there's a way forward. But before we look at the way forward, let me say thank you to Danielle and her colleague for that wonderful presentation. Now, one of the things that COVID-19 has exposed us in as human beings is the stark inequality among school children. Now, what do I mean by the stark inequality among children? When the pandemic started around March, the president of the country asked all of us to close down schools. DPS, as we are, as innovative as we can be, we realized that we couldn't go with all schools. We sat down, planned, and we rolled out the virtual classroom system. In reality, every child, if we were living in a country where we took education seriously, every child would have been enrolled in such a program. But this is a situation where COVID exposed us as humans to situations where children who, if you like, attend what I call the Ivy League schools will have their teachers teach them virtually, and those in the public schools close, and stay home. So that's one of the things that COVID has actually brought to us. Secondly, I want to talk about the fact that about 30% of school-going children started school because schools were in session and they were being fed morning meals, if you understand what I'm saying. Now, what I mean is that in Ghana, the state has actually rolled out a program where school children are fed every day they go to school. We call it the school feeding program. Now, an approximate 30% of students started school because of this particular program. The fact that we had to stop school and stay at home got all the students or children stay at home. What does that mean? What it means is that children are staying at home without food because the economic status of their parents is nothing to write home about. Again, another thing that has also happened is the lack of readiness for infrastructure in schools, especially for teachers. Now, DPS has always been the forefront of these things. Our director has always been very, very smart to look at the way forward and present policies and ideologies which will make sure students and teachers benefit. So I can say with all the pride in me that even though COVID-19 has brought a lot of hardship, DPS as a family, we have been affected, but of course, comparatively, we are better off because our students have gone on with their classes, teachers have continued to receive their salaries, and so on and so forth. But what it is that a lot of schools haven't had the infrastructure to roll out the virtual lessons, so obviously students have suffered. Next, you want to look at the increasing cost of education on already burdened parents. Now, parents struggle to pay fees, and then because they have to continue with the virtual classes, of course, they have to buy internet data and everything to make sure children benefited from these classes. Obviously, it impacted their economic status. Then lastly, I want to talk about the fact that the cash flow for most proprietors and proprietresses of schools have also been affected or has also been affected. I mean, DPS, we had our own challenge with that, where because children were not coming to school, a lot of parents decided that for one reason or the other, they were not going to pay fees. But we thank God that they are seeing reason because we continue to engage their children and things are moving positively. Now, these are the general points I have. Now, let me quickly talk about the impact specifically on students. One, the fact that students who had to take exit exams, I mean, the final year students never got to write their final exam. That's a huge, big deal, which Danielle and her partner adequately spoke on. But the point is, I, as a teacher, and I'm speaking from a principal's position, it could be different with any other person who is a teacher. Now, I have never believed in writing exit exams as a principal. Now, that does not mean that I will not conduct exam for my students. I will. But you see, the point is this, that if a student sits on their feet for, let's say, let's take the universities, for example, or let me even take the IGCSEs. A student comes to school grade 9, or even like grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10. And then the student has about 1 or 2 months to write a final exam, which will determine the student's faith before the student can access sixth form. I think that the world should come together to look at holistic ways of making sure even students who do not do very well at exit exams are given some incentive to move on into their next classes. I think it's very important. And the principal can bear me out on this, that when we had to decide, because Cambridge said we should look at predicted grades, I was one of the teachers who stood firm and said, I am going to use my continuous and internal assessment. Because as the class 9s know me, I told them from the very word go that your predicted grade and everything will be dependent on whatever you have in the exercise book that I'll mark. And that is not something I'm going to shy away from. So it's important that we develop a system where every exercise, every classwork, every class, every project will factor in the student's promotion. And let's think less of exams, even though that is where the world is going. What about the fact that some teachers have also lost their jobs? Of course, I'm not talking about DPS. A lot of teachers have lost their jobs, especially those in the private schools where there are no adequate interventions in place to make sure the teachers are still working for them to receive their salaries. They've suffered because, of course, if the children are not coming to school and they're not paying fees, why should I continue maintaining you as a teacher only to pay taxes at the end of the month? So teachers have lost their jobs. And don't forget the impact on the families of these teachers, because most teachers tend to be breadwinners in this country. Again, you also look at, most important, and this is the last point I'm making, maybe there will be an opportunity for us to discuss this further. Now, the trauma and the psychological issues that students have had to go through, not only students alone. Now, if you talk to any psychologist, they will tell you that this is a huge one on the very inflexible minds of our adolescents. What is the way forward? I think that as a society, we should come together and then try to implement policies that will be wholly targeted at making sure students are getting the education they need to get, regardless of whether there is COVID-19 or not. This is where I want to end. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Afo, for such an in-depth analysis on the impact of COVID-19 on education. We are so proud of you, and we are so grateful. I will move on to, this is the last comment or last submission on the topic, and then we'll hear from Tanya Ma'am, and then we'll draw the curtain to an end. We have Mr. Daniel Danso. He is the head of Science Department, DPSI International, and also the Cambridge coordinator for DPSI, for DPS International. And so, Mr. Daniel Danso, you have about 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes to wrap up. Thank you very much. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shadrach. And then thank you very much, Mr. Afol, and our dear principal also. Good evening. Good evening to everybody. So most of the points have been highlighted on the impact of COVID-19 on education. I am just going to add a few things to it. You see, since the global lockdown of educational institutions, there are so many major things that have happened in the sector of education. It has caused a lot of interruptions. Well, most schools have turned to the virtual learning. Other schools are also suffering a lot because they've not been able to do that, like what Mr. Afro mentioned. But then trust me, the virtual learning is not the 100% solution to whatever we are facing right now, because it has a lot of challenges. Honestly, it is very difficult to even teach some chapters using the virtual learning, like Zara and Danielle mentioned. Now, there are several aspects to look at. I'm just going to mention a few of them. If you look at examination, like Mr. Afo mentioned, the final year students, they have been very much disappointed. And then this is something that we have to learn a lot from. I think that Cambridge and then other educational institutions or bodies, examining bodies, they should fuse in this continuous assessment thing, because most of our students, they basically prepare for the final exams. So they don't usually pay attention to the day in, day out exercises and then tests that they have been doing. And then when it comes to something like this, I think we should all learn something from it. If we had documents and then proper data with Cambridge, we wouldn't have been made to suffer to bring out all this evidence to predict grades. We know we have done our best, but then it is going to favor some students, and then some students are also going to suffer a lot. With the global recession taking place right now, it is also going to be very difficult on the final year students, especially those graduating from the universities, seeking their first employment. You see, when this situation happens, the job market becomes a little bit poor. So people tend to accept jobs that will give them really poor working conditions. And then from what experts are actually saying, this can affect a lot of careers. That is, most people who accept jobs that are meager, that is, for the first time in their working career, it affects a lot of their careers. And then overnight, this particular pandemic just came, and then teachers and students, everybody have to adapt. We started, like what Mr. Afo said, some students are quote unquote in the Ivy League schools, so they will have access to all resources, but then other students will not be able to access that. Children are from different backgrounds and so on. Now, we as a community, educators and education researchers, we really have to sit down. This is the time we need innovation. We need partnership, and then we need solidarity. We need to collaborate to make sure that these students are not left behind. Our students in the villages and so on and so forth. And this is where government actually plays a key role in bringing innovative methods to help these students. The government of Ghana is doing very well to roll out several things that will help bring the education back on its feet. But then there is still more that we can do as a community. Let us also not forget that education is not mere teaching and learning. It brings out so many talents in the students. Students have the opportunity to learn communication skills. They are able to interact, social interactions with their friends and colleagues. And then they are able to unearth a lot of talents, all in this school system. Now, coming to the virtual learning, most of this communication might be hindered one way or the other. Not everything, but in one way or the other. You know, when this happens, if this should continue for a long time, we might have a huge gap. And if this, say, goes on for like 3 or 4 years, we are going to produce a lot of students that are going to lack in this aspect. And then research has shown that most students who are very good in communication succeed better in their job. That is their job than students who are just quote unquote book smart. You see, so if we are not careful and then this continues and we don't have any solutions to it, then we are going to face a lot of challenges in this particular aspect. Now, what are some of the innovative things that we can do as a community? Like I already said, UNESCO and then other agencies are actually brainstorming on how to help, especially the poor and the isolated. But then what we as individuals can also do is maybe in our best, try to maybe design some curricula to help bring out the best in our students as individual teachers. That is what we can also do. But then all these things need to come on the table for us to actually discuss and see the best way out. But then one thing that COVID-19 has actually brought to us, we knew this thing was coming, technology in education. We knew it was coming, but we did not know that it would get here this fast. Overnight, we have just become technologically inclined. But then we should not forget it when all this thing is over and we go back to our normal lives. We should not forget this. We have now been able to bring situations whereby we have our students 24/7. We can contact them. We have several ways of communicating and then guiding them through education. We should not forget this. We should try as much as possible to inculcate it in everything that we do to help benefit our students. I would like to say very well done to Zara and then Danielle, and then very insightful comment also from our dear principal and then Mr. Emmanuel. I am not going to take a lot of time. I think this is what I also have to contribute. Thank you very much.
Wow. Wow. Very well, Mr. Daniel Osedanso, for the superb presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on education. I like the dimension where you took your presentation to. Tanya Mom is supposed to speak to us, but I think she's a bit engaged, and so we may not be able to involve her. But I'll be glad to take the last word from the principal, if he's around, the last word from him, and then we draw the curtains to an end. If the principal is around, the last word. Thank you, sir.
My concluding thing will be, I heard from everyone. I know my teachers, my children, And in fact, what only DPS, the whole world, will know how to cope up with this COVID-19. That may stay with us maybe for another few months, but then the show will go on, be it the business, be it the education. Everything is going to go up, come back to normal. People will know, children will know how to take care of themselves. Everyone. According to me, this COVID-19 has even taught us certain things. It has taught us how to be together with our family. It has also taught that how precious it's when we connect to people, when we meet people all of a sudden. Like today, when I see so many people around me, I'm feeling so happy. The second thing is we have also learned self-discipline. We have learned how to be hygienic and everything. So let's also learn certain things positive out of this COVID-19 situation. And then when we really finally emerge out, we'll be successful for sure. God has given us intelligence. God has given us wisdom. We know how to cope up with this situation, and we will be successful citizens enjoying this world. By then, even the environment, as we already saw a clipping of what was China before and what is China now, the environment would be clean, everywhere green, and we are going to have a very good future coming. Let's pray for that. And thank you very much, children, my teachers, and all those invited guests who contributed. This program was really good. And I wish Mr. Aful makes sure that he takes this clipping and promotes it, and thereby encouraging all the efforts taken by my children. Hats off to Mr. Shadra. Good night, everyone.
Very well, sir.
Very well, very well, sir.
Very well, sir.
Very well. Very well. Kudos to our students and our guests for honoring the invitation to be part of this maiden webinar on the impact of COVID-19. We are so grateful, and I'm humbly suggesting and pleading to the principal, when we come back to normal, we should honor these students and we should appreciate them. Maybe a special assembly for them.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So thank you very much, and for honoring the invitation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.